most glorious events every December is a Swedish Nobel Prize ceremony held in Stockholm. There we get to see all the royal ladies and their absolute glittering jewels from some that are centuries, like hundreds of years old. So today we're going to talk about the gorgeous and insane looks that we saw recently at the Nobel Prize ceremony because they are incredible. And I want to start off with my favorite today, which is Crown Princess Victoria. She looks absolutely smashing in this purple gown, and it is by Camilla Thunlin. But what I really want to talk about today is the tiaras, because this is part of Tiara Tuesday. I know it's Wednesday, but it is Tiara Tuesday. And we are going to talk about this gorgeous piece she is wearing because it has a rather interesting history. So this is a Napoleonic amethyst tiara. And yes, it is actually from the court of Napoleon. That is how old those amethysts are there. So this necklace is made up of technically 15 large amethysts, although there was originally a 16th, and it was eventually made from a necklace into a tiara. So this used to be worn simply as a necklace, and they decided to go ahead and put the tiara frame on it, and I'll go into a little bit of detail on that. But it's really quite astounding, the gorgeousness of this piece. And it also has a matching earrings, bracelet, necklace, and a devant de corsage as well. And so these amethysts originally, according to history, as far as we are aware, originally belonged to Napoleon's wife, Empress Josephine. And she gave these to her daughter-in-law, Princess Augusta of Bavaria. And Augusta ended up leaving it to her daughter, Josephine of Luxembourg. So she ended up leaving it to her daughter, Josephine of Luxembourg, who ended up marrying King Carl I of Sweden and Norway in 1823. But yet, what is also interesting when it comes to Sweden and France is this connection with the Bernadottes, which is currently the royal family of Sweden, because Bernadotte is actually French. So the original member of the Bernadotte family, he was Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte, who was part of Napoleon's military, ended up actually being asked to come over and be king of Sweden. I can't remember quite the situation that led to that, but he acquiesced to that request. And so we do have some other Napoleonic jewels there in Sweden as well. But it's interesting too to just see how some of these migrated over to Germany and then eventually up into Sweden. So I love that connection and that history there. And again, this was originally a necklace, but Queen Silvia of Sweden, and she is, I want to say, one of our more creative royals when it comes to jewelry. Queen Elizabeth II actually wasn't that creative, but we have like Queen Maxima and Queen Silvia who are very, very creative with their jewels. And Silvia decided really the necklace was too heavy. These are very big gemstones. And she thought, you know what, we're going to make this into a tiara instead. And so she had a frame made and she started wearing it. We've never actually seen the jewels taken off the frame. Obviously, they can be taken off the frame and re-put back into the necklace, but they've decided to go ahead and start wearing this piece as a tiara, and then they do have one extra stone that didn't quite make it, and so that can be used as a brooch or hair ornament. So the amethysts are set in gold, and the diamonds in white gold. And I had to say, this piece I have sometimes mixed feelings about because it's very difficult to place because it's a full circlet. And so sometimes it looks fine, and then other times, not so much. I do actually think particularly this time it's placed very well on Victoria's head. It looks utterly beautiful. And I just really, really love the stunning color of the amethyst and her purple gown. She really does look absolutely gorgeous in it. It really fits her, I think, exceptionally well. And I just, again, think this was the perfect choice for her for the Nobel Prize ceremony itself. This is actually a rewear of a dress she's worn previously, but I really do think the placement of the tiara here is perfect because I feel like it maybe was placed a little bit higher before. Now it's a little bit more back, more like a headband. The best version, I think, or the most creative, I would say, wearing of this tiara was actually Princess Madeline back in 2012 at the Nobels. It was her first time wearing this particular tiara, and she set it pretty far back on her head, and it was tilted, and she actually pulled about half of her hair through the tiara. So the back of her hair had this little bump where the tiara was actually still going, but then she also had this great volume, and she was actually able to place it, and it looked better. Because sometimes, again, this tiara is tricky because if you place it wrong, it just sort of looks odd. But I think this is particularly a great appearance for it. And again, it's quite a gorgeous, gorgeous piece. And I'm so glad that we saw it. And I would have to say for the first night, Victoria was definitely 1,000% my favorite look. And before we go on to our next look here, I do have to say, if you love everything that glitters and is gold, I do have a sponsor for this program, which is Ana Lucia Diamonds, because every time I look at these videos and I watch the diamonds sparkle, I know I cannot have a tiara like that. I know I can't. But I want a little bit of sparkle in my own life, and I feel like Ana Lucia Diamonds does that really, really fantastically. I have this gorgeous tennis bracelet that I love and I wear with my watch every day. I have some pairs of earrings and I have some rings as well. So if you want a little bit of sparkle to add a little bit of fun to your day, I think Ana Lucia Diamonds is a fantastic way to go. So feel free to go ahead and check out the link down below. If you use my code Royal20, you get 20% off. And so now back to the bigger diamonds, because we love diamonds here. Okay, so next we'll talk about Princess Sofia of Sweden, and she wore her Parliament tiara that they purchased for her on the occasion of her wedding. And this tiara has actually become well known for being very versatile in a way, because the little toppers, little emeralds on top that she has can be replaced now with turquoise, with citrines, with oh goodness, pearls, and I think one other stone that I'm forgetting here, maybe blue topaz or something. And so this has become very versatile piece. And so she's wearing it actually in her original wedding configuration, although I will say it was originally how the tiara was designed. It sat more on top of her head instead of sort of hugging her head like normal tiaras do. So they went ahead and they did change it, which I think makes this tiara look 1,000 times better. When I first saw it on her wedding, and I was like, I mean, it's not bad, but it looks odd. And what I will say is interesting about Sofia, as well as we saw this tiara again the next day, is that she really does tend to stick to this piece exclusively, which I find rather interesting because Sweden really has one of the best tiara collections out there. I think they have some incredibly gorgeous pieces. Not all the houses are quite as blessed as Sweden is. Not only do they have a lot, but they're very beautiful designs. You can't always see that about everywhere. And so it's surprising to me that she tends to just exclusively wear her wedding tiara. I don't know if this is internal dynamics in the family. I don't know if this is just her personal preference, but it's just interesting thing to note because she is a married-in member of the family rather than a blood royal. And I generally think when it comes to choosing the tiaras, yes, whoever is highest up in the line of succession generally gets to choose first. But in this case, since the king does have two daughters, I believe they probably actually get first choice when it comes to tiaras. And Sofia probably gets the last choice until, you get to his sisters. The king has 4 sisters. And they don't always go to every big event or wear a tiara, so that's not quite as big a deal. But when it comes to Sofia, she just generally tends to stick to her wedding tiara. And she has sort of some interesting jewelry. She's technically wearing 2 Swarovski necklaces. I don't know if I quite like that. And she also is wearing an Dianta gown. And I do have to say, so they showed some pictures of it on their social media. Honestly, I think this gown is kind of boring. There's just not much to it. I don't think the necklaces, especially dual necklaces, really help the matter. I think especially because it's black, it really, really does blend in and just doesn't give it any dimension. It's obviously a very simple design. And I mean, it's not bad. I just think it's kind of boring. And she definitely, I thought, looked better the next day, which we'll get to. But yeah, this was not my favorite appearance from her. But honestly, most of the time, I feel like her fashion is not that great. Okay, so when it comes to Queen Silvia of Sweden, she also wore repeat. This was a George de Arndt dress that she had made that is a repeat for her. She leans on this designer quite a bit, and I think this is actually a very elegant dress. She's actually turning 80 this year, and so I think this is a particularly good-looking piece. I think she looks lovely for her age, and she is wearing what I've always considered the 9-prong tiara, but is apparently the Queen Sofia's tiara, but I've always called it the 9-prong. So this was made for Queen Sofia of Sweden and Norway in around 1860. And so yes, this tiara is actually quite old. And apparently it's very tough to wear because how they designed it at the time is that it has a very firm base, and so it doesn't move much, and so it sort of digs into your skull in an awkward way. It's probably one of those tiaras where you really have to have the exact right head size to make it, I think, really fit very well. They have done some things to make it sit a bit better on the head, but it's still, as I understand it, quite uncomfortable. So it has these scrolls and large diamond elements, and you also get this sense of almost a sunset or a starburst design in the tiara, and it is, I think, somewhat beautiful. It's definitely not my favorite. And apparently also, in addition to just the base being tough, apparently it is actually quite heavy. So they must have used a lot of metal work in this one because it doesn't have, you could say, the oomph of some of the other tiaras, but apparently it has a very challenging design in some ways, which I thought was rather interesting. And so this one made its way into the royal collection in 1872. And it became part of the Royal Jewelry Foundation of Sweden in 1913. So a lot of royal families had this. They're called foundations, basically, where all the jewelry within the family is a part of this foundation. So when someone dies, they don't have to worry about inheritance rights or something like that. It goes back to this foundation, which is part of the family, which everybody sort of has access to, within reason, of course. And it allows the family to continue to curate their collection and keep these without getting hit with inheritance taxes, which usually means you have to actually end up selling some of the jewelry in order to cover the taxes, which means it goes into a private collection, usually never to be seen again. So this happened obviously with Princess Margaret's children. They had to sell Baltimore tiara, which is the one she famously wore to her wedding, and in a bathtub. Yes, they had to sell that in order to cover the inheritance taxes. We know other tiaras she was lent by Queen Elizabeth or her mother eventually made their way back into the main family line. And I still think one of her tiaras, which I'm really hoping we see on Catherine one day, is a turquoise tiara, because I do like the turquoise tiaras. I didn't like them, but they've grown on me. So that is one that I believe made its way back into the collection because it's a bigger part of the family, not just something personally owned, because Margaret did purchase the Baltimore tiara. So it is mostly worn by the Queen in the nine-prong, but she has lent it to her sisters-in-law before. This happened at one of the weddings. I'm not sure if it was Carl Philip or Crown Princess Victoria. And they usually do this because in a big event like this, everybody's wearing tiara. The king has 4 sisters. The king obviously has 2 daughters or either 2 daughter-in-laws who are attending. And so they have to figure out who gets what tiara. So the king does lend some of the, you could say, more substantial pieces to his sisters. One of the other ones to consider, which is kind of interesting, is the bottom fringe tiara, which is usually exclusively worn by Crown Princess Victoria. Her mother wears it, and a couple of her aunts have worn it, but neither her sister nor her sister-in-law have worn it, and is generally, allegedly, not confirmed to be something that is meant to be for the exclusive use of the crown princess, whoever that might happen to be. And so then the next day we have what we call the king's dinner. So he invites all the Nobel laureates back and they all sit down for a wonderful dinner. And I love this room. We've seen this room featured in other state visits, and I love how Sweden gives us this inside scoop a bit, because the Brits are a bit stingy. They don't let people in and get, these just gorgeous and amazing videos and pictures of the tiaras and everything. It's really quite sad. So Queen Silvia, though, for that day was wearing the Loschenberg tiara. So I tried to look up how to pronounce it, and I was watching a documentary, and that's the closest I can get. I know there are some pronunciation police people out there, but I gave it my best shot. So we don't know what gown she was wearing, but she had a Judith Lieber clutch, which I think is darling. It's a little shell design, and she's wearing, again, the Loschenberg sapphire tiara. So this apparently, according to research, and I actually watched a bit of a Swedish documentary about their tiaras, and this section actually was in English because I believe the woman was German and didn't speak Swedish, but she spoke English. So, and a lot of people, most Swedish people actually know English. And so she gave her part of the interview in English, which was fantastic. And she said that basically through a series of letters, they discovered that most likely, these sapphires and this tiara were actually a present given to Princess Augusta of Bavaria, who you might remember we mentioned earlier in reference to the Napoleonic amethyst tiara. And these sapphires were actually perhaps given by Napoleon and Josephine together. So these sapphires have direct connection to Napoleon, definitely, obviously, Empress Josephine, but by extension to Napoleon as well, because he was mentioned in this letter. So it was likely made by Marine Etet Niot, and it is quite old. Obviously, it has 11 sapphires and also has a matching necklace, earrings, a brooch, and a set of hairpins. So you can be very creative with this. And what's really, really interesting is that when you see it in this documentary here, you see it lays flat. So you can actually make it a full circlet, or you can make it more of a tiara shape. And the nice thing too is because it is flat, it lays flat when it's not in use, you can actually match it to your head. So when we were talking about the 9-prong and the problem with the stability because it just doesn't have any flexibility, you compare it with one like this that has a lot of flexibility, and you see the benefits of that because you can shape it to your head so it makes it more comfortable and it's easier to wear. And so the sapphires on this piece can also be removed, and it is part of, again, the royal family's foundation. And this is one exclusively worn by the queen. We have never seen anybody else, even the king's sisters, wear this particular tiara. So it's definitely very much one that we called the big guns, which are those exclusively reserved for the use of the queen. So it is a gorgeous tiara. I was excited to see it. And we know that Queen Silvia, obviously she's almost 80, and she has been struggling, I think, recently with some of the weight of some of the bigger pieces. She has mentioned them in videos that some of them are quite heavy, particularly the Brazanga tiara. So she doesn't wear that one quite as much. But it was lovely to see this tiara. I think it is absolutely gorgeous. And I appreciate this more than the one she wore the previous night. And then next we have Crown Princess Victoria of Sweden, and she's also wearing a Camilla Thunlin skirt. And I actually really like this skirt, and I like the top. I think this is actually a really pretty look, and it goes gorgeously well with the Connaught tiara. So this one came to the family in 1905 with the marriage of Margaret of Connaught to Gustav Adolf, the grandparents of the current king. So that is Carl Gustav. And so this has a very, very romantic feel to it. It has these diamond drops with this forget-me-not in the little scroll details and everything. And it's just such an interesting and unique tiara that you don't see very much, I feel like. It's just, again, very light, very versatile, but very, very unique too. And it's just something, I can't think of any royal family. We do have, obviously, lovers knot tiaras and like the 5 tiara, which does have dropped diamonds, but I just can't think of any tiara that looks quite like this one. It's very unique in that respect. And so Carl Gustav's mother, Princess Silvia, wore this one quite frequently. And Carl Gustav's father actually died in a plane crash, and so he actually inherited the throne from his grandfather. So he came to the throne very young, much like Queen Elizabeth II. He also just celebrated his Golden Jubilee in Sweden. I was there. It was some wonderful festivities. And so Silvia was really attached to this tiara. And so when Silvia died, her daughter, Princess Christina, wore it at her wedding, and it is personally owned by Carl Gustav. So this is one of the few times we do have a tiara that is personally owned by the family. We have a couple of other instances of that as well. And so this one I feel like is sort of special who gets to wear it. Has not been worn by Princess Sofia, who's the daughter-in-law. Princess Christina, so one of the king's sisters, have worn it. And it took quite a while for Princess Madeline to be able to wear this. And apparently, according to the court jeweler, and I'm bummed because they didn't say what tiara she was apparently going to wear, but Princess Madeline wore this tiara for the first time at her sister's wedding, and apparently it was a last-minute switch because even the base of the tiara was still wrapped in a darker felt, which would match the hair of her sister or her mother, not herself, because her hair at that point was blonde. And Princess Madeline is gorgeous, but this was not her best look. This was really not her best look. Once she let her hair go a little darker, I think that was when she really, really blossomed. And so it was surprising to see her in that. She's worn it a couple more times since, and she's actually worn it as a necklace as well. Unfortunately, she wore it with a dress where you really couldn't see it, but apparently this one can be worn as a necklace. In addition to the drops themselves can actually be taken out and worn as a necklace, so the tiara could also be worn without the diamond drops too. And so again, this one seems to have a special connection to the family. And so it seems to be very curious who gets to wear this particular piece. And then we do have one more to go over. We won't talk about the tiara because we already did. And Princess Sofia did, though, exchange the emeralds for diamonds. So it would be interesting to see maybe if she had rubies to put in there, but rubies are pricier. And so she did wear a Adelanto gown in red, and it was one that was reconstructed from one she wore previously. And I do have to say, I think this is an improvement of the previous one, and I think she probably won the best look of the evening. Like the first time she wore it, it had this very simple design that was very much, you could feel bridesmaid. That's like what the dress reminded me of. The fabric and everything was very bridesmaid-y. This time, because it's off the shoulders, it has a little bit more of that royal look, I feel like. It looks like they also adjusted, and either she's wearing higher heels or they hemmed up the dress a little bit so it's not dragging on the crown quite so much. And I think the color is gorgeous on her. I think the dress is gorgeous on her. I think it's a great, fantastic look. And I think she won the second night, although Victoria is a close second. I really do like Victoria's look as well. You would not think so, but it's actually a bit fussy, but it kind of works with the tiara. So I think all these dresses are absolutely gorgeous though. And the tiaras, oh, you cannot get any better than that. And just a quick little shout out. We also have another tiara appearance by Queen Maxima of the Netherlands. She was there to welcome President of South Korea and his wife. They previously did a state visit in the UK a couple weeks ago. Now they're in the Netherlands. She wore the Mellerio Ruby tiara from the Dutch collection, which is one of the most gorgeous tiaras, I think. It's a very, very pretty piece. Honestly, the Netherlands probably has the most gorgeous tiara collection, I think. Besides the Brits, they probably have the biggest. The Swedes are a close second. I kind of debate between the Swedes and the Dutch. But I think she looks absolutely gorgeous. She's wearing a Costalero's dress, which she has worn previously. And this dress was actually for sale for a while on Net-a-Porter. So I don't think it's still there. But if you ever wanted it, it was actually there. And actually Queen Matilda of the Belgians wore the same dress, I think in blue though. So guys, I would love to hear your thoughts. So what was your favorite royal lady look of the evening? Thank you so much for watching. And I can't wait to hear who you vote for your favorite dress. So guys, I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Bye.
We don't count the carats, we count the centuries.